Hello, everyone. I'm Fred Schiff, Chairman of the Florida Corporate and Academic Partners Committee on FMEA's Board of Directors. On behalf of the FMEA Board and staff, I welcome you to Opportunities for Music Education in Florida through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Thank you for being here and having a vested interest in music education so you can become agents of change to help your districts recover. As you listen, the information may fly at you quickly, but don't worry, the seminar is being recorded and will be posted to the FMEA website for future viewing. All presentation materials and associated how-to documents will also be made available. Please enter your questions in the chat as they will be addressed after the presentation. We are truly fortunate to have this trio of music industry titans working with us. They possess decades of incredibly deep experience, and they couple it with the insight and knowledge of our current circumstance, giving us our best opportunity to succeed. And now our presenters. For many of you, Lynn Tuttle is a household name. By title, Lynn is the Director of Public Policy, Research and Professional Development for the National Association for Music Education. And by action, she is a friend, leader, author, and advocate. Bob Morrison is the founder and CEO of Quadrant Research, the nation's preeminent arts education, data analytics, and market research firm. His leadership in research, public policy, and advocacy efforts have led to significant advancements in access to music and arts education programs in America. And if you visit his office, you can see his Primetime Emmy and Peabody Awards. Our first guest is Mary Larson. Mary is Director of Public Affairs and Government Relations for NAM, the National Association of Music Merchants. Since 2001, Mary has directed NAM's government relations and advocacy efforts and guides the organization as an international leader for music education. Mary's enthusiasm for our community is unrivaled, and her energy is boundless. Friends of music education, please welcome Lynn Tuttle, Bob Morrison, and Mary Larson.
Thank you so very much, Fred, and welcome to all of you, with a special thanks to Fred, a very important NAM member and NAM advocacy fly-in participant, and for your great leadership in Florida, and to all the Florida Music Education Association leadership, which is here tonight, and all of you. Before we jump into our presentation, a special heartfelt thanks to all of you with great respect and admiration for the work that you have done these past many months to sustain and support the lives of our precious children and the precious young people in Florida. We know how creative and innovative and determined, empathetic and passionate and compassionate you have been with your students in your communities. We know we could not have done this musical journey without you and the way you've sustained so many young people and their families. So our deep respect and thanks to you. As Fred mentioned, the next slide, we have a URL where all of the information will be posted. It is going to come at you a bit as a fire hose. There's a lot of information, but this complete PowerPoint will be available to you, and a lot of follow-up information as well. And we'll be watching in the chat and do our best to answer questions. So let's take a look at these relief funds, and I'm going to give you maybe a 50,000-foot view. To date, the total relief funds that is at our disposal as a nation is $5.3 trillion. That's counting not only the education relief funds, but the funds that are available to states, counties, and local communities. This, if you get out your basic calculator, this works out to $43,000 per household. Now, that doesn't mean we get that money per household, but that's the mathematical equivalent, and it gives you a sense of the scale of this once-in-a-generation relief program. If we were to compare it to our World War II recovery funds, it's the equivalent of $4 trillion in 2020 dollars over 4 years. So we're spending more now, certainly than we did in the equivalent recovery time period after a world war. We're anticipating that with these relief funds and the rebounding in the economy, we could be seeing a dramatic economic recovery in our country. And the concept of these relief funds, as you can see by some statistics there from polls, it is nonpartisan in its nature in terms of popularity. And we even see that there's approval rating from 46% of the approval comes from our Republicans. So in other words, it is has been greeted as a nonpartisan relief package. And I think that's important to note as we enter into the reality of this. So how much money is going to be available for schools? You see three columns here. One is the CARES Act passed in March 2020. The next one was in December 2020, and the most recent one, March 2021, sometimes referred to from left to right here, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. You can see the total education total, and then you can see what's allocated by K-12 and also for higher ed, which is significant. And this is in billions. This is in billions of dollars. The governors have set aside for some special projects as well in the billions in each of these funding programs. I think it's important to note that the first two, ESSER 1 and 2, CARES 1 and CARES 2, in the education dollars was spent or is in your district already or should be soon. Many of these funds were used for remote learning, for early PPEs, for much of the needs that happened when schools were shut down and all remote learning occurred, professional development. But what's happening now in the March 2021 funds, the 126 billion to K through 12 is the largest amount of money and the amount of money that we're going to talk about in terms of your engagement with and how you can access these funds for music education. So we're going to look at the 168 billion. This is flowing to, I want to get these code words out of the way really quickly. State education agencies. This is your Florida State Education Department. So these funds are going to be flowing through the state education funding and to higher ed. So they're going to be going through these agencies. They'll also be going to governor's funds in each of these states, and you can see the allocation. But let's look quickly at the next slide, the K-12 funding. So the amount of funding that will be flowing to your school district, which is referred to, you'll hear it over and over, lead education agencies. Don't get hung up on that term. That stands for your school districts, the term for school district. It'll be 90% of your state allocation will be flowing to your state school districts. I think it's very important, again, as we look at the amount of funding, and it is substantial, and Bob's going to take you through the tables for Florida. States are required by statute to spend 90% or pass 90% of the funding down to your districts. And states are also required to spend these funds quickly, and also if they don't spend them, the funds have to be returned to the federal government. So there's a lot of incentive and direction on the use of these funds that they need to be going to local school agencies. Now, one thing that's important to know that when the funds arrive in your local school district and the plans for the use of these funds, they're going to be allocated based on Title I allocations. Pretty much, I think I could say, without looking at all the data, Bob probably has looked at the data, every school district in America is using Title I funds in some way. For students in the disadvantaged, social economics, poverty level, students with special needs, homeless students, there are Title I funds flowing into school districts. So the allocation of how much money a district is going to receive is based on that formula. But we're going to say it over and over. It does not follow Title I rules. It's just simply the math used to distribute those funds. That information is already available to you, probably on your school district website. You know how much Title I funding you are receiving and what percentage your district is of your district's budget is coming from Title I. You can kind of use some basic math here when you look at the school district tables to start gauging how much money is actually going to be available to your district. And soon it will be available formally from your state education department. Funds are going to be remain available through September for a year, over a year from now. Local education agencies, again, there's a school district uses these funds, is to earmark to use these funds for learning loss. It's a concern we have relative to music education, but you will see that learning loss is also in the same sentence as social and emotional needs. And this is where we are very important. We're tending to the true needs of children and how important music and the arts are as they return to school. And the states are required to set aside some funds for learning loss, as well as students that are homeless and have other special needs. Now we have a bit of breaking news in the next slide that we just received with the guidance that was coming forward from the U.S. Department of Education. And I have to read this because it's very significant. LEAs, and we know that's code for school district, might also address the needs of students arising from COVID-19 pandemic by using ESSER and GEER funds, education relief funds, to implement or expand arts programs such as music programs, including purchasing instruments. So we're very a bit breathless with that direction and that lengthy document that gave states and local school district that direction. It tells us that we have a bit of clarity in the direction for the use of these funds that we can act on. And we can act on the use of these funds locally as we work to develop a plan for the use of these funds, work with our central office administrators to move these requests forwards to the state education departments. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maestro Morrison, who will take us through what it looks like for Florida as these funds flow through the state education department. Bob?
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. And good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today talking about this very important topic. So let's cut to the chase. What does this mean for Florida? What does it mean for you? What does it mean in your particular communities? Well, here is the breakdown of the funding coming into Florida. As you can see, we have it organized by CARES 1, ESSER 2, American Rescue Plan is the third area, which is basically ESSER 3. As Mary said, we call them ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. And then the total allocation. And you can see how much money is going into the individual districts, how much money is being retained by the Department of Education for other projects, and then the overall total that is going out to the state. So you can see here, as part of ESSER 3, we're talking about the lion's share of the money that's coming, and that's $7 billion that's coming into the state of Florida, of which the 90%, or $6.3 billion, is going directly to your school districts. So it's important to understand the volume of resources that we're talking about just in ESSER 3. And remember, there were two other tranches of funds that have been allocated, and some of which your districts have already been utilizing, I'm sure. But the most significant chunk is what we're talking about today, and that is ESSER 3. And one of the things that Mary mentioned, which we cannot overstate, that the formula on how much money a district is getting is based on Title I funding, but it's not governed by Title I regulations, right? So that then begs the question, how may ESSER funds be used? Well, along with the ESSER legislation that came out for the American Rescue Plan, they provided guidance. And there are 15 plus 1 guidance areas that I think it's important that we walk through. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a crash course in these 15 plus 1 areas of guidance on how these funds can be used, and then make the connection back to, well, how does that connect to what you do with your particular programs? So are you all ready? You sure? All right, here we go. Governing regulations for allowable use of funds. Number 1, any activity authorized by ESSEA of 1965, including the Native American Education Act, the Alaska Native Education Equity Support and Assistance Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act of 2006, or Subtitle B of Title VII of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Got it? Yeah, didn't think so. The whole idea here is they're basically listing every single federal education policy law that is on the books. Anything covered in there, you can use the funds for. Pretty general, right? All right, so here we go. Number 2, coordination of preparedness and response efforts for local education agencies with state, local, tribal, and territorial public health departments and other relevant agencies to improve coordinated responses among such entities to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. So how do you coordinate between agencies, between the school district and local other folks? Funds can be used to support that. Providing principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. Pretty broad, right? Providing principals and school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. Number 4, activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, foster care youth, including how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. So, things that need to be done to address the special needs of some unique populations. 5, developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of local education agencies. 6, training and professional development for staff of local education agencies on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infectious disease. 7, purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities of a local education agency, including buildings operated by such agency. 8, planning for and coordinating and implementing activities during long-term closure, including providing meals to eligible students, providing technology for online learning for all students, providing guidance for carrying out requirements under IDEA, and ensuring other educational services can continue to provide consistent with all federal, state, and local requirements. So, dealing with the long-term closures. Now, you may say, but we're on the other side of this. Well, the reason why it makes these references is the funds can actually be used retroactively to the beginning of the pandemic, March 13th, 2020. So some of the language here is in reference to how those funds could be used actually to pay for things that the district has already paid for and reimburse the district for those items. 9, purchasing educational technology. How many of you have been involved with that, including hardware, software, and connectivity for students who are served by the local education agency, the school district, that aids in the regular and substantive educational interaction between students in their classroom instruction, including special communities and those who may need assistive technology? So we know a lot of you have been using software, hardware, connecting with students, getting licenses, buying new programs that you can be utilized for students. So this is another opportunity for something that that these funds can be used for either retroactively, or these funds could be used for future programs, things that you want to use as the school comes back into session. Providing mental health services and supports. That there is addressing the social emotional learning needs of students. So to the degree that you have activities that you are utilizing to intentionally address social emotional learning needs, number 10 fits the bill for you. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning and supplemental after-school programs, including providing classroom instruction or online learning during the summer months and addressing the needs of low-income students, children with disabilities, and all the other specialized populations. Right? So this is about how do we accelerate learning? How do we address, as Mary mentioned before, they talk about learning loss. I don't talk about it as learning loss. It's really learning delay. And so how do we accelerate learning? How do we give our students a jump start? And funds can be used for summer programs, for summer camps, or if your district is doing some sort of summer program for academics, suggest that they include an arts component so that students that have not been together can come in the summertime and make up for some of the lost time, play together, begin to reconnect with one another as part of your program. 12, addressing the learning loss of students, including low-income students and all the special categories here, by administering high-quality assessments, by implementing evidence-based activities, by providing information and assistance to parents and families on how to support their students, including in the distance environment, and tracking student attendance, improving their engagement in distance education. So again, addressing learning loss that we talked about before, but something to keep in mind, learning loss is not the province of language arts, literacy, and math. Learning loss is not the province of the tested subjects. There has just been just as much learning loss in the arts, in music programs, if not more, than any of the other content areas. And we need to remind people of that constantly because sometimes they get myopically focused on just the tested areas. But learning loss has occurred in the music programs as well. 13, school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards and to support student health needs. So any repairs to your rooms, any modifications that you've had to make in order for the school or for your program to reduce the risk of virus transmission, that all falls under 13. 14, inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities, including mechanical and non-mechanical heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, filtering, purification, and other air cleaning fans, control systems, and window or door repair or replacements. So this is all about ventilation, airflow, air exchange in the room. Things that you would need to do, whether it's filtration, maybe it's a standalone HEPA filtration unit in your room if your band room or your music room doesn't have great ventilation or doesn't have a great air change. The funds can be used to support those type of initiatives. Then there's 15, which is the all other duties as assigned, right? Other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services in local education agencies and continuing to employ existing staff of local education agency. That means the funds can be used to make sure that the staff that are there can be supported, that they maintain their level of instruction and employment to support those students. So other activities, that's as general as it gets. So it's, anything that's not covered by the above can be covered by number 15. And then lastly, this is one that they just slipped in with this latest round, which is the develop strategies and implement public health protocols, including, to the greatest extent practicable, policies in line with the guidance from the CDC for the reopening and operation of school facilities to effectively maintain the health and safety of students, educators, and other staff. This is the line that says, and you can use it for anything that you need to get your buildings open, because we want to get the buildings open. We want to get the students back in there. We want to get our teachers back in there. And we want to get back to whatever our new normal is going to be as our schools reopen. So those are the 16 areas. And you go, well, you might sit there and say, I'm not quite sure how that connects to what I do. So we're going to throw some breadcrumbs out at you. So here's some things how it connects to music education. Instruments, supplies, materials to help ensure health and safety. Remember, we can't share instruments anymore, or at least it's not a best practice to share instruments anymore. So if you need to buy instruments because you were sharing that euphonium with 3 students, now you need 3 euphoniums. So you can use the funds to purchase instruments, supplies, and other materials that help. And the numbers on the side show you the guidance numbers that are supported by that. PPE, cleaning supplies, and sanitation, 3, 5, and 7, right? Things that you need, puppy pads, other items that you need to keep the facilities clean. Facility considerations like in-room HEPA air filtration units, 13, 14, and 15. And in talking to James Weaver at the National Federation of State High School Associations, one of the co-chairs of the COVID aerosol study at the University of Colorado, he said to me recently when we were talking about getting ready for back to school that the most beneficial use of funds that educators could use would be to go out and buy an in-room HEPA air filtration unit, that would be your best friend for years to come, in protecting not only for COVID-19, but any other airborne respiratory virus. So facility considerations. Instructional support and additional faculty, 4, 9, 10, 11. That includes 10, where we talked about social emotional learning, right? And it's also covered under 15, instructional support, maintaining our teachers. But it also talks about additional faculty to maybe surge additional music educators into beginning programs, because now instead of having 1 year of beginners, you might have 2 years of beginners because you really didn't start that many in the prior year. And now you want to make sure that you can claw back some of those students that you missed along the way. Summer programs, right? Covered under 10, 11, and 12 that we talked about, those summer camps that you can do to stand up to bring students back in. And planning under 1, 2, 5, and 8, how you plan to come back in the fall and what are the things that you need to support those programs as you do that. And lastly, any other things. These were just some, idea starters to get you thinking about how you could utilize these funds in your programs. But for more information in the Google Drive that we set up for you, there are a lot of resources, some of which we're not even going to talk about tonight, but 2 of them are the NAFME's ESSER Funding Toolkit, which has a lot of information on things that you can use and things that you can do with the funds. And we have the document that we used here in Arts Ed New Jersey for our arts educators on how they could utilize the funds as well. So 2 resources, again, not exhaustive lists, but are there to provide you with a way to think about how to approach your individual situations. But the most important thing is that this is an opportunity to think differently. It's an opportunity not to think about how do we go back to the way it was, but how do we move forward? How do we take what we learned and incorporate it into our practices as we move forward? And what do we need to do so that we can really rebuild our programs and bring them back to full strength? But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize before turning it over to Lynn is that, again, under the guidance and under the relief funds in their what they're sending out in their messages is that 20% of the funds have to be dedicated to not only student learning loss, but also social and emotional needs. So don't think that you can't apply for or utilize those funds, because to the degree that you are utilizing them in a way to address their social emotional learning needs through their ability to express themselves in music, you can apply for that. There's also the comprehensive after school programs and the summer camps and summer enrichment areas. So, it's very important that you be aware that there are other opportunities in these for use of the funds, even though it may not say quote unquote music next to it. You got to be strategic in looking for how you make the connections between what you do and what they're looking for. And then lastly, they must solicit public comment for the use of funds. Secretary of Education Cordona made it very clear that there must be public comment on how a district intends to use the funds, that they can't just come up with a plan and tell everyone this is what we're going to do. They've got to solicit public input on it. And their plans must be posted publicly to the website. And this is the information that they put out there. The secretary said that he wants meaningful collaboration between districts, educators, parents, and other stakeholders, right? Meaningful collaboration, not fake collaboration. So this is a really important point for you to keep in mind. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to my great pal and one of our all-time exceptional music and arts education advocates, Lynn Tuttle, who is going to talk about what you can do now. Take it away, Lynn.
Thanks, Bob. And thanks again to Fred for having us join you this evening. It's great to be with all of you. So Dre and Mary have been chatting away here and sharing some of these ideas of, so what do I do now? How can you get involved in the process? And what might be some of the things you want to consider? So as we think about getting involved in the process, right, while you may not be originally invited to the table, as Bob just pointed out, you are welcomed at the table by the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Secretary of Education. So pull up a chair and get yourself seated with the folks in the district. So first and foremost, become knowledgeable about the use of the funds. And that's why Bob took the time that he did to walk through all of those fundable activities. So now you have a sense of what the intent is for the use of the funds, and you can start to think about how those connect to the needs of your music program, the needs of your students, and hopefully the needs of the music program sort of across the district. So not just in the school that you serve, but across your entire district, because this is a district set of funds, right? So think about how those funds could connect back to in-person learning and instrumental, vocal, and general music programs. All right, so think about that. And then this is a time to start talking with your supervisor, right? So if you're fortunate enough to have a district arts coordinator, go knock on his or her door and have this conversation. If not, find someone else. It could be your building principal, it could be your curriculum person at the district office, but ask for their understanding of what the process is going to be for your district, and tell them that you would like to come forward with a plan of how the funds can help support students returning safely to school and being part of your in-person music programs. So start, knock on the door and start asking some questions and be seen as a resource. So as Bob shared out, right, it's meant to be multiple people getting input. And I frankly don't think there are better people positioned to make that happen in a given school or school district than music educators, because you all connect with a boatload of people just to get your work done as a music program person, right? So your administrators and supervisors, your colleagues, you have support groups and band boosters and choir boosters and orchestra boosters. You have parents that you work with, you have community partners, you have folks in the industry that you connect with. And of course, many of you are grooming and helping students become leaders and mentors in the field. All of those voices can be part of your planning process. And if you can show that and document that you had all those voices involved, you're helping the district meet its requirement for collaborating with the community to get the plan put together, and you'll have a better chance of getting your needs met through this funding process. So what are some of the success stories looking like across the nation? We've seen ESSER funds, earlier iterations of ESSER funds being spent on instruments for high school and middle school band programs. We've seen a percussion camp in Dayton. Our colleagues over at Yamaha shared that one with us. We've seen PPE materials and equipment in your own state, and another school district in your state is using, I think, ESSER 3 funds to purchase music curriculum. If I recall, for this school district, it's a district that while there's a regular rotation for curricular materials in the other content areas, music is not included in that. So music traditionally doesn't get an allocation of capital to purchase new curriculum materials. And so they're able to make the case that they needed some, especially some that connected to the use of more technology in music classrooms post-pandemic, and were able to get those curriculum materials purchased with ESSER 3 funds. And I want to share, I just heard from a colleague in Kentucky yesterday that in Bowling Green, they are using the funds to support instrumental students with lessons, with private lessons, to sort of accelerate their learning, as Bob was talking about, now that they're going to be back in person in the fall. So it's actually helping pay for those studio teachers to help students get up quickly the technique that they may have lost during the lockdown. So those, again, are just some ideas and some examples of folks that have been successful so far in capturing ESSER funds to support music programs. So the other thing to think about, and Bob hinted at this as well, you have the opportunity now to be a little strategic. These funds are going to be around through 2023, 2024. So maybe take some time to plan. And where do you want to take your programs? As Bob and Mary mentioned, it's not necessarily just about, building back to where we were, but where do we want to go? And how can we engage more students in music and in our arts programs? And that's something that's really important to the U.S. Department of Education and to Congress, right? This sort of equitable access question. So where do we have students who haven't been engaging? Where can we get more of them to engage in music? And what might we need to offer in our programs, or how might we need to gather them in and help them become part of our program? So this is really an opportunity to take time, take stock, work with your colleagues in your school district to think about what you want to do and where you want your program to go, and how could these funds help you do that strategically? Are there capital investments you can make right now that could benefit the program for years to come? For example, purchasing instruments that could be used over multiple generations of students. That's one way to approach it. So thinking about what can you use these dollars for strategically that will allow you to grow your program, allow students to thrive in your program for years to come. And in case it's helpful to you, NAFME has a set of opportunities to learn standards. So these aren't content standards, but they're standards that talk about the resources and materials that you need to offer a high quality music program. And that can be a great sort of checklist to go through to see what you might be missing and help you focus your conversation with your colleagues in your district. And I love this one. I think Mary helped us put together this slide. Keep in mind that it has been not only an extraordinarily tough year for you as an educator and for your students, but for your administrators. When you think about all that they've had to go through to think about, will the building be open? Is it going to be closed? How are we going to get students in? How do we need to exit them out if we need to close again? All of those pieces, they have been extraordinarily taxed in this time. So what can you do to help them now as school buildings reopen and as you look forward to summer and fall planning? What can you do to help create and recreate an amazing school culture? Nothing does that better than music. So how can you help? From a drum circle for a first faculty meeting, to a percussion line to welcome everyone back, to students who you've had in your programs helping out with that first assembly. Just be a resource. Ask your principal how you can help. How can you help the school get back up and running? Or if it's been up and running, how do you celebrate all that students have been able to do this tough year? So you bring such possibilities with your programs. Start talking to your principal. I know many of you do this already. It's time to double down and keep doing it and do it some more. All right, so what's the call to action? Mary never likes us to leave without getting you guys a call to action, right? So look up and review all of this information that we've been sharing with you. Find out what that allocation is for your school district. We are working with your colleagues at FMEA. It doesn't appear that information is public yet on the Florida Department of Education website, but it could be that your federal programs person at your district knows that already. So go ask. Doesn't hurt to ask, right? Talk to your school administrator, talk to your principal, to your supervisor, share what you know, share what questions you have, say that you want to be part of developing this plan, and then develop that plan with your colleagues, with your parent boosters, with your students. Engage as many different voices as you can. It'll strengthen the plan and it will help the district sort of defend the use of the funds in this area, even though of course they can. They're not used to spending federal dollars in music and arts education necessarily. So you want to make sure you've got a good, solid plan that connects back to those fundable activities that Bob took you through. And if you want, you'll see, if you go back on our Twitter feed at NAFME or on Facebook, we highlighted each of the fundable activities during the course of the month of May and came up with suggestions of how they tie back to music education. So feel free to make use of those resources as well. And there are some webinars available through your Florida Department of Education about the funds. And Bob, I don't know if you have anything else to share, because I know you and Kathy Sands and others have been digging to find information. So anything else to share about this resource?
Yes, I mean, this is the page that'll be in the drive, as well as some information that Kathy was able to pull together about some of the allocations. But this is the page to watch for where the updates will be coming when Florida does release their district allocation and their specific plans. But in the meantime, now is the best time to get ready before their information comes out, so that you're already prepared in your conversations with your administrators for how to use the funds. Because one thing that we keep saying over and over, if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's right.
If you want to be, want to be a player in this game, you have to raise your hand and you have to ask.
And Bob, right, you can ask not just now, but probably again in the fall and next spring and the fall after that and the spring after that. These funds are around for a while. And even the best minds in the best district in the nation, they're going to come up with a plan that's then going to end up changing. So there's going to be rounds for amendments, chances of dollars that didn't get spent the way they thought they would, that might open up opportunities. So even if you get told no up front, there may be opportunities further down the line. This is a long game, but you gotta ask, you gotta start asking.
Absolutely. And then Mary's going to walk us through one more item that will help us weigh in with the Department of Education. And I think it was actually probably very helpful in getting the department to call out the music education inclusion in their most recent release last week. So Mary, you want to cover this last section?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. And you're absolutely right. Had we not been at the table, Lynn and Bob and a larger coalition with the U.S. Department of Ed and the new administration as they were being formed, we would not have probably gotten this far and had that breaking news directive. So it is being at the table. It is asking questions. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is, if you don't tell people, they don't know the value of the work that you are doing and also the value that you bring to students every day. So not also do we want you to be at the table for these funds, but you need to be telling your administration, telling stories and sharing with the great work that you've done through the pandemic and also are planning as you move forward. And that is a project we're asking you to help us with by simply preparing an email to write to the U.S. Department of Education and a new project that they have there called the Best Practices Clearinghouse. And it is our feeling that although our Department of Education is very well intentioned and really has some very smart and bright people working there for us, sometimes they don't really understand the impact and the power of music education every day on the lives of children. So we need to tell them. And this is a great opportunity for us to do so. They're seeking input on the 3 topics you have on your slide here: self and healthier environments. This could include the instrument aerosol study protocols in terms of bringing students together for in-person music making, teacher and faculty well-being, which can also include the work that they're doing together as teachers, maybe in terms of their own professional developments, and also professional development for teachers themselves, looking at the needs of the school as they come back together. You're actually preparing a single email, and we'll give you that email address. There's no timeline, there's no website, there's no survey to complete. They want to get fact sheets or information, step-by-step guidelines and policies that you've put together, and anything that relates to you bringing students together. Maybe it's a recruitment guide. Maybe it's a back-to-school night addressing for instrumental music recruitment. Maybe it's your first vocal program or choral concert and the protocols you've put in place for that. What they do not wish you to submit is anything that has to do with editorials or commercial advertisements. I think that's pretty clear. So we've given you a bit of a template to follow. With NAFME, we created this template. First, provide your contact information, your subject line. Safer music education could be one, or bringing children back together for general music, K-5, whatever you would like to be specific about your subject. Your topic in terms of does it address safer protocols for in-person learning, professional development, the needs of students and parents, for instance, and your target audience. It could be early childhood, K-12, middle school, high school, and then in a short description, 2 or 3 sentences about what your protocol is. And this is so important for us to be sharing with the U.S. Department of Education. For an example, students are coming together for the first time in 15 months to do vocal music. Here's how we're doing it. These are the protocols and that this is the music that we're studying together, in addition to the conversations that we're having about the music, the reflective part of music education. And that reflective part of music education could be addressing many of the societal needs and the social emotional needs that our children are facing now as they're coming back to school. So it's telling the story, the holistic story of the power of music education as our children are coming back to school. What makes the lesson learned best practices, and how you are engaging audiences across the equity, the goals for equity and access. So this is the email address, bestpracticesclearinghouse@ed.gov. It's an email. And this information will be available to you on the drive that Bob has provided. Again, so important that we tell our policy leaders about the impact and the value of music education. This is one way that we can tell folks right at the top of the house. And we've been doing this for several weeks now, and little by little, it's getting through to the clearinghouse, which you can view. You can view the clearinghouse, search for music, and see if your submission is going to be admitted to the clearinghouse. So we really would hope you would do that. Back to you, Fred.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Lynn. At this point in time, we will open up the chat to questions. So if you do have a question, if you'll go ahead and put that in the chat, I'll read them out loud, and one of our guests can answer the questions.
First of all of you Floridians, you have some of the most wonderful photo, or what we call screenshots. Michelle with your flute playing kitty, that is really great. Wade with Bernie Sanders in the timpani, that is totally awesome. But I'd love, if you would all want to turn your cameras on. I saw a wonderful comment from, I think it was from Michelle, that she's taking this information to her school district tomorrow. If your camera is on, or if you want to use that little emoji hand raiser, who else is going to do that within the next 24 hours? Take this information, have a conversation about this information with colleagues. I'm seeing hands starting to wave and little emojis go up. That's the call to action. Knowledge is power. You came into this field of teaching because your belief in knowledge is power. This is a download of knowledge for you to start sharing. That I saw Bernie Sanders over there in the timpani. He's going to do that. Really, really important that we move that you have this knowledge. And as the information about these funds starts swirling around you, you have knowledge that you can take to a working group and make a solid contribution about, and get some planning going for music and arts learning. And that's the power that you have in your hands. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other parting comments from any of our guests tonight? Bob, do you have anything last to say?
Yeah, so just one of the things I wanted to address, I saw some questions in the chat regarding, the supplement supplant issues, and there were some concerns early on in how the handling of the first two batches by some states, where the funds were taken in, and they didn't really do anything from an education funding standpoint. They just used those funds to cover their education spending, and took the money that they would have spent on education and moved it elsewhere. So they basically just kind of took the money and did a little bit of a transfer. With this particular batch of funding, there is a maintenance of effort requirement in there, where the state is responsible for maintaining their funding levels of an average over the past several years, so that the funds that are coming in from the federal government are going directly to, or the 90% is going directly to the school districts for the stated purpose. So there was some concerns, particularly in other states that shall not be named, that where the funds were just going to be taken by the state and never really make their way into the school district. Because of the maintenance of effort requirement under the American Rescue Plan and ESSER 3, that can't happen. So I know that there was in the chat, they said there's a waiver, I believe, that someone mentioned that the department has applied for, or an extension for when they get the funds. And even if that is the case, which I have no reason to doubt that isn't the case, the funds still cannot be diverted to any other purpose. They will still have to be used as additional funding to support the educational infrastructure, and with 90% of those funds going down to the district level. So hopefully that will alleviate some concerns about the funds being shifted around. And I think that the idea is to prepare now for when that window opens. And so having the information now, thinking about how you use it, prepare now, and remember, if you don't ask, you don't get.
And I want to follow on Bob says, it doesn't mean that there won't be some news circulating about what someone thinks should be an option. Let's remember, what we've been so careful to provide to you tonight is the factual information based on statute and based on requirement. And it's been part of our work is that when we bring information to you, it has that clarity of purpose. It doesn't mean, as we've heard from other states too, that there's a little bit of news circulating around that they're going to do other things with these funds. It's in law, and things could be challenged, and there could be conversations, and there could be, things that happen because of the way people think things should occur. But this is very clearly directed. It's been a law that's been signed and passed. It's funds that are already moving in many places. And now you have the information, and you can start the conversation locally. And that's what's really important.
And I saw one other question in here from Chase, wanting to know if they needed to contact their state representatives about this at this point. And I don't believe that, I wouldn't do that. There's nothing really that they can do. This really is moving through from the U.S. Department of Education to the Florida Department of Education. What I would want to find out about is, because there is a 10% set aside for the Department of Education, and states are using that in a variety of different ways, providing mental health services or funds to support additional mental health services, providing funds to some private schools or schools that did not have any Title I allocation in their formula. Other states are using them for very specific, activities and projects. It would be interesting to find out what the plans are from the state. And the state is also having to have stakeholder engagement conversations with concerned organizations. And I would expect that your state teachers association, that your school boards associations, that your principals associations, that they're all banging on the door of the Florida Department of Education, wanting to have an idea of what they're thinking of on how to use that 10% of funding. And I think that is a valuable use of some energy of getting an understanding of how those funds may be utilized. And that's why you have the great Kathy Sands and her team over there, who will have their finger on the pulse of what's going on at the Department of Education and making sure that your interests are represented. So that's what I would do. I'd leave the state representatives and your legislature out of this. This is really an education game, and it's being played by the education leaders.
Thank you for that clarification, Bob. I appreciate it. Lynn, I'll bounce over to you. Do you have any parting comments for us?
Just again, many thanks for doing this work, and for everyone who took time out this evening to come learn and become knowledgeable about these funds. And we so look forward to learning how you're able to engage with your district administrators and what amazing programs you end up coming up with that get funded by these funds, because we really want to hear those success stories as well, so we can share them and broadcast them around the nation.
Thank you, Lynn. Mary?
Just thank you all, and thank you, Fred, for calling us to the table here and allowing us to share with you. We're a resource to you in any way that we can be, connecting with other networks. We really want to hear from you. We'll put our emails in as well if we haven't already. We really want to hear from you along the way so we can share your success story. This truly is a network of all across the country that is working together to bring those beginning band orchestra students back together, to have those middle schools expand from band to orchestra to mariachi to class guitar to technology to choruses and music appreciation, music experiences of all kinds. And this is our chance. This is once in a generation education funding. It's very, very exciting. And thank you for all that you do.
Once again, my sincere thanks to Lynn Tuttle, Mary Larson, and Bob Morrison for their incredible wisdom and the information that you have shared. Thank you to the FMEA board and staff who embrace and support the advocacy efforts of the music industry. And thank you to all that participated today. I'm Fred Schiff, encouraging all of us to take this information and turn it into action. This completes our seminar. Goodbye, everybody.